Meanwhile, City Power says it will shield Johannesburg residents from one stage of load shedding every time Eskom requires it to shed customers from the grid, now that it has signed a new power purchase agreement with the privately owned Kelvin power station. Isaac Mangena is City Power spokesperson and joins us now. A very good evening to you, Mr. Mangena, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So before we get into the agreement itself, I just want to understand, what is the official position on this, given the fact that Eskom had earlier said that it has not entered into an agreement of power supply transfer. Does this affect this particular deal?
Thanks, SABC, and good afternoon to the viewers at home. Maybe let's take this opportunity to clarify these issues. These are two different matters. Eskom is right. There was no power purchase agreement that was signed with Eskom. The purchase power agreement was signed with Kelvin Power Station, which is a privately owned power station based in the east of Johannesburg. That is what we did during this week, where the mayor, executive mayor, Councillor Mpumoerani, and also the premier of Gauteng oversaw that historic moment where we signed an extra 100 megawatts of power from Kelvin Power Station to ensure that we deal with the issues that we are dealing with. What we did with Eskom, however, was to basically ensure that we assist each other. Ourselves and Eskom have got a long-standing relationship. They are our major stakeholders. We are buying electricity. Majority of our electricity that we use is actually purchased from Eskom. So what we normally would do, both parties, is to assist each other where we've got challenges in terms of electricity supply, which is what we did with Eskom in response to the challenges affecting the residents of Soweto.
So just also take us through, we talk about 100 megawatts of supply. What would be the impact on the requirements that City Power would have to cut off if Eskom says we need to load shed?
Yes, that historic moment when we signed the power purchase agreement with Kelvin was to ensure that we deal with the constraints that Eskom sometimes finds itself in, to ensure that we've got extra capacity for the residents of the city of Johannesburg, which will ensure that we at least have extra 100 megawatt of electricity as and when we need it, especially during this time of load shedding. We had a long-standing relationship with Kelvin, a 20-year agreement, which is expiring in November, where we used to get 80 megawatts. So we are doubling that so that at least we are dealing with some of these issues that you raised, especially whereby businesses and even school children are affected by load shedding. In the past, we used to have an opportunity to basically activate that relationship that we had with Kelvin, where we would offset at least stage 1 and 2 of load shedding through that deal. So this will ensure that we continue on that trajectory, whereby we deal with the issues, especially in terms of capacity that is so much needed in the city of Johannesburg, where we are having plans to basically ensure that we increase investment in the city of Johannesburg, but also to deal with the issue of inconvenience that is currently happening when there is load shedding for the residents of the city.
And I want to understand, how long has this been in the works, this agreement? I understand that it'll take, 12% of the electricity supply for Johannesburg, or it'll provide that much. And can we expect more such agreements in the near future, given the erratic power supply that you talk about?
City Power and the city of Johannesburg, as the shareholder, we have a plan to basically allow new entrants into the energy sector to ensure that we deal with most of the issues that we have in terms of the constraints that we are dealing with. So the deals that we are going to be signing with the independent power producers, which Kelvin is one of, will ensure that at least we deal with these problems that we are dealing with of capacity across the city of Johannesburg, especially when it comes to the supply that we receive from Eskom. But it also bring in the new players who will ensure that at least we've got a alternative supply of electricity. We shouldn't concentrate or focus mostly on the cutting down on the fossil fuels that are being used, and ensure that we use new entrants that will bring around alternatives like gas, solar power energy, and so forth. So
is there a timeline for those? Is there a timeline for those new independent power producers? And I ask this because it's been raised so many times. If you look at places like Soweto, Ivory Park, Orange Farm, Finetown, Deep Split, they will tell you that they are disproportionately affected by this. In fact, it's almost been said that there's been some spatial segregation. It's more the informal areas, townships, poor areas that get their electricity supply taken at a much higher and frequent rate than those in the more affluent areas.
The timeline on our plan, our energy plan, is until 2030. So we will gradually introduce new players moving into 2030 to ensure that we increase capacity. The areas that you are mentioning currently are actually the areas that are currently serviced by Eskom, which are in the city of Johannesburg, and that's why we are getting into this negotiation with Eskom to ensure that we deal with those kind of challenges in those areas. Remember that the city of Johannesburg already supplies electricity in the areas that, they supply other services, including water, emergency services, roads, and so forth in those communities. So.
Thank you so much for your time. City Power spokesperson Isaac Mangena. Fortunately, we have run out of time. Let's take a quick look at your weather projections.